What if the final diplomatic barrier collapses? What if the intelligence agencies of a dozen nations confirm definitively that Iran has assembled its first functional nuclear warhead? This is not a speculative fantasy. We assess this scenario based on observable military doctrines, verified force deployments, and the cold logic of deterrence theory. We avoid moralizing, we avoid fear, we track the sequence. The immediate global reaction is not war. It is a seismic shockwave of realpolitik adjustments. Within hours, a covert but unprecedented arms transfer is activated. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, states with the means, receive immediate, quiet security guarantees and advanced conventional weaponry from their patrons. The nuclear umbrella extended by the United States to its allies in the Gulf and to Israel becomes explicitly active. B-52 strategic bombers are repositioned. Ballistic missile defense ships, the Aegis cruisers and destroyers of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, move to maximum alert stations in the Arabian Sea and Eastern Mediterranean. This is Phase 1, Containment and Shield. In Tehran, the calculus shifts overnight. The weapon is not a tool for offensive conquest. It is a regime survival guarantee. Their doctrine would mirror early Pakistani or North Korean models, a minimal credible deterrent aimed solely at preventing external regime change. The leadership would likely issue a stark, simple declaration. Any attack on Iranian soil will be met with catastrophic retaliation. The goal is to paralyze the previously plausible option of a preemptive military strike by Israel or the United States. For the first time in decades, the cost of attacking Iran is rendered unacceptably high. But deterrence is a two-player game. For Israel, its foundational doctrine, the Begin Doctrine, which states it will not allow an existential enemy to possess nuclear weapons, has technically failed. The red line has been crossed. Yet, a direct strike on known nuclear facilities now carries an existential risk of nuclear retaliation. The Israeli War Cabinet would not launch a conventional attack as a first resort. Instead, it would trigger its own Samson option preparations, ensuring its second strike capability is unmistakably visible to Tehran and the world. A profound silent stalemate sets in. The Middle East enters a state of frozen hair-trigger conflict, more dangerous than the Cold War ever was, due to the proximity of the adversaries and the absence of decades of protocol. The instability manifests elsewhere. Iran's regional proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Shia militias in Iraq, now operate under a perceived nuclear shield. Would they become more aggressive, believing their sponsor is untouchable? Likely. But Iran's leadership would also understand that any major attack traced back to them could trigger a cascading response they cannot control. They would likely tighten, not loosen, the leash on their proxies to avoid accidental escalation. Power brings not just opportunity, but also the burden of restraint. Meanwhile, the global non-proliferation regime shatters. In boardrooms in Riyadh and Ankara, the serious, quiet debate begins. If Iran has one, and is now seen as safe from invasion because of it, can we afford not to? The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty becomes a historical document. The world does not descend into immediate war. It descends into a frantic, multipolar nuclear scramble, where a dozen new nuclear thresholds are reconsidered. The true first consequence is not an explosion, but an irreversible erosion of a 70-year-old global order. This is the new reality. A world where a regional crisis no longer risks a conventional war, but a potential nuclear exchange from day one. The deterrent works, but it makes the region a permanent tinderbox. Every incident, a ship seizure in the Strait of Hormuz, a drone strike on an Iranian factory, a skirmish on the Golan Heights, is now viewed through a nuclear lens. Decision-making slows down, paralyzed by risk assessment. But the underlying tensions continue to simmer, unresolved, and now magnified 1,000-fold. Let us escalate the scenario to its breaking point. A year into this tense stalemate, an incident occurs. Perhaps a cyber attack on Iranian nuclear command and control, attributed to Israel, creates panic in Tehran. Fearing a decapitation strike is imminent, the Iranian military places its nuclear forces on the highest alert. Or perhaps a successful Israeli assassination of a key Iranian nuclear scientist leads to a mandated severe retaliation. A massive barrage of conventional ballistic missiles is launched from Iran toward Israeli population centers. Israel's Iron Dome and David's sling systems engage, but some get through. Casualties are high. This is the moment of maximum peril. Israel's cabinet, operating under tremendous pressure, must now decide. Does it respond with its own overwhelming conventional force, or does it escalate to the nuclear level to end the threat permanently? The United States, detecting Iranian nuclear forces on high alert, issues a direct, urgent ultimatum to both sides. Stand down. The world holds its breath for 12 hours. Here, we see the limit of power, for Iran, using a nuclear weapon against Israel, guarantees its own annihilation. It is not a weapon of victory, but of suicide. For Israel, using a tactical nuclear weapon on Iranian soil to destroy buried facilities risks radioactive fallout across the region and legitimizes nuclear warfare, opening a door that cannot be closed. It also risks a direct military confrontation with Russia or China, who may feel compelled to intervene. The logical, albeit horrifying outcome is that even at the brink, the nuclear threshold is not crossed. The retaliation remains conventional, but devastating. Israel would likely target the entire spectrum of Iranian military and state power: air defense, command centers, naval bases, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' infrastructure, in a campaign lasting weeks. The war concludes not with a victor's parade, but with mutual exhaustion. Iran's conventional military is crippled. Its cities suffer from infrastructure collapse due to targeted strikes. But the regime likely remains, sheltered in its bunkers. Its nuclear deterrent intact, but perhaps its delivery systems degraded. Israel survives, but at a terrible cost in lives, economy, and long-term security. It wins the battle, but proves the unsustainability of this new paradigm. The world witnesses that even with nuclear weapons, regional war is still catastrophic, and nuclear arms only raise the stakes. They do not resolve underlying conflicts. The final outcome is not World War III. It is the grim realization of a new abnormal, a multi-nuclear Middle East locked in a perpetual managed Cold War, with crises flaring and receding under the shadow of mutual assured destruction. The cost of power is eternal vigilance and the constant burden of miscalculation. The nuclear weapon does not grant Iran hegemony. It grants it a precarious, costly form of survival, while making the entire world less safe. It transforms the region into a prison where every actor has the keys to destroy the others, and therefore lives in a state of armed, anxious confinement. The ultimate takeaway is not about who wins, but about the nature of strategic power. Absolute power does not translate to absolute security. It creates absolute vulnerability. It imposes absolute restraint. The bomb is not an instrument of domination, but a cage of one's own making. The sustainable victory is not in unleashing power, but in managing the terrifying weight of its possession. For sustained, clear-eyed analysis of power, strategy, and the realities that shape our world, remain connected. This was ThinkCell.